The corniest moment was we lived in Coney Island, right sandwiched between auto body shops with these big guys that worked there. They were like muscly, kind of gruff guys working on cars all day, and we were kind of clambering down our really thin hallway and out the door. And as I walked out the door, I just started singing, "Someday we'll find it." And then as my mom walked out the door, she said,
sort of absent-mindedly, we're just singing it.
Someday we'll find it.
The Rainbow Connection.
The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
and
as that happened, we'd done this little act right downstairs. There's this big guy who had like this big ponytail, and he was all tattooed, and he was just standing there, kind of looking at us.
He was looking at us so quizzically, like, what the hell are you doing in Coney Island? But just like, where did these people come from? Because it's a pretty intense inner city kind of vibe there, and it just was so absurd.
It was really funny. Someday we'll find it.
The Rainbow Connection.
The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
This is the most disgusting and hilarious story ever. Okay, so I was in the Republic of Georgia last year, and I ended up having this long conversation with this guy there who spoke English, but he's Georgian, and he ended up telling me this story from his childhood about he had tons and tons of siblings, and his name was, what was his name? Shergill. And he had a younger brother like Georgi or something like that. That's a common Georgian name, so I'll just put out Georgi, right? And his younger brother liked to suck eggs when he was little. And he would go into the chicken's nest, and he would poke a little hole in it, and he would suck all of the yolk out, right? And then he would just like put it back, so that no one knew what happened. They didn't know it was him that was doing it. And so then, so the mother would be cooking, and she'd go with all these eggs, and she'd just keep on cracking them. They'd just be empty eggs. And so everyone in the family kind of just figured, well, the chickens are just laying empty eggs, like, drat. So one day, Shergill and his younger brother, not the one who sucked eggs, some other younger brother, they were there at home alone, and their whole family was off at a funeral. And to cheer up the family, they wanted to like make something for when they got home, and they really, really, really wanted to bake a cake. And so they were sitting there, they were ready to bake the cake, and then they remembered that their chickens had been laying empty eggs. And so they thought for a little while, and then they figured if the chickens are actually laying empty eggs, they gotta be full at some point, right? The eggs have to be full at some point. So they made this plan. And one of the brothers, they caught a chicken, right? And one of the brothers grabbed the chicken, right? And the other one shoves his hand off the chicken's butt, and he starts feeling around, and he feels some egg things up there, and so he just yanks it on out. And so out come these eggs, but then with the eggs come all these guts just come pouring out of the chicken's butt, right? And so you have these eggs, and then all these guts just spewed out of the chicken's butt, and the chicken's not dead. The chicken is still alive, and it's just kind of sitting there like that, right, with all of its guts coming out of its butthole. And so then they kind of get really scared, and they just take the eggs and they kind of leave, and they just leave the chicken out there in the lawn. And so they go and they make the cake, and it's in the oven, and they go and the whole family comes home, and they're like, oh, we made you a cake, it's a wonderful cake. And so then the whole family ends up going into the backyard, and they see the chicken lying there with its guts coming out of its butt. But here's the twist. While they were inside making the cake, 5 other chickens had gone up to that chicken and started eating the guts of the other chicken. And so there's these 5 chickens that are attached to this one chicken, and they can't bite through it because beaks can't bite stuff, right? So the guts are just coming out of these 5 chickens and going into this other chicken's butthole, and the chicken is still sitting there alive like this with these 5 chickens attached to guts coming out of its butthole. And the whole family just is standing around staring at this chicken, and they ask Shergill, they say, "What happened?" And Shergill just looks around kind of terrified, and he says, "I don't know." I don't know. This is the scariest thing ever. And so then they decide, okay, what do we do? So they just grab the guts and they just pull them, and it just comes out of the 5 chickens' mouths, just right? And then those chickens just kind of get up a little stunned and walk away, and they're fine. And so then they kill the other chicken, and the guy ended the story with, it was some of the best chicken soup he'd ever had. And that's the most disgusting and hilarious story ever.
That is.
The most otherworldly experience I ever had was in April of 1999. I was sent to Korea for a year for military service as an Army medic. And I still remember to this day getting off the plane and being shuffled rather quickly onto a bus to go to our reception station to find out where we were going to be sent. I remember boarding the bus and sitting down and looking around at people I'd never seen before, and I didn't know anyone. And then we started the trip to the reception station, which was about an hour and a half away or so. And I remember looking out into the evening at all of the different buildings and everywhere that we were traveling. And it just shocked me at how much it was completely unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I couldn't recognize, what any of the stores were or what any of the shops were. There was nothing familiar. Everything was foreign. It was definitely a stranger in a strange land type of experience. I didn't know why I had done it or what I was doing to be there. I enlisted when I was 18 years old and left right after I graduated high school, and it was the first time I'd ever really been that far away from home. It was very difficult for the first few months because you just didn't recognize anything and you were just in a completely different culture. It took me a while to actually be able to pick up where I was going and understand, the 2 little squiggles with the 2 dots meant coffee shop. Finally I was able to find my way around, and it wasn't quite as strange, but still an amazing experience.
Okay, the sleaziest. When I lived in Atlanta, my best friend in Atlanta was having a birthday party, and I remember my girlfriend at the time asking him if he would have sex with her. Now, I don't know if that applies to her being the sleaziest person that I've ever met or the sleaziest that I've ever felt, but it's got to fall into one of those.
'Twas in another lifetime, one of toil and mud, when blackness was a virtue and the road was full of mud. He came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form. Come in, he said, I'll give you shelter from the storm. This is a story of my friend Paco. About 10 years ago, when I wore a younger man's shoes, I met a guy named Paco. He was Mexican, a few years older than me, 6, 7 years old. Back when I was a less productive man, more rudderless. I met him one day. I was reading a book. I believe it was Virgil in his original language. And Paco was quite impressed because he said, well, most of the people my age, and including some of the people that I was spending time with, weren't very productive. But Paco encouraged me. He said, look, you're going to be something. And at the time, I didn't have much encouragement because, I was, I had no job. My personal hygiene had gone to hell. I suffered from halitosis. And Paco encouraged me. He said, you can get a job, you can get educated, you can cure that hideous breath. And as time went on, I heeded his words. I became more productive. And I went to school, got an education. Now I'm a law student. And recently I went to share these things with Paco. I went to his mother's house, a very kind old Mexican woman, very kind. And I said, is Paco around? You know, I want to talk to Paco. I got some real good news for him. He's gonna be very happy. And she looked at me and she said, Paco está muerto. And I said, say it ain't so. And she said, it's so. I said, how long? She said, Paco está muerto por 2 años. And I said, I haven't seen him for 2 years. And I felt terrible because he inspired me. If it wasn't for Paco, I might not be the man I am today, but in that period of productivity, I lost track of him. But anyhow, I mean, he inspired me to be something good, something positive. And I'm still friends with his mother today. But I'll never forget the day she told me, Paco está muerto.
The most amazing thing one of the most amazing things I ever experienced was at a conference called the Mythic Journeys Conference in Atlanta last year. It was based on Joseph Campbell's life, and there were a lot of amazing people there, and including Alan Lee and his daughter Virginia Lee, who worked on Lord of the Rings and won an Academy Award for it. And at one point he asked me, we were having a conversation and they were on their way to lunch, so he asked me to lunch, and I got to sit there with him and John Matthews and who was working on King Arthur at the time, and Brian Froud and Wendy Froud and Holly Black, who lives here in Amherst now. But it was really cool. I started talking about my writing and he was really impressed with it, and I asked him if he would write something in my journal, and he drew a picture of himself as Gollum, and he said, "Keep scribbling, Jane." And that was really cool.
Hi there. I'm a little nervous. I've never done this before, but I have a story, and it is of a paranormal nature. I'll start from, well, I'll leave out a lot of details, but I had a friend who was my best friend, who was 25, my best friend of 25 years. And he died very young of a heart attack. For various reasons, he had health problems. He died at 29 years old of a heart attack. And needless to say, I was devastated. And totally unrelated to that event, I started seeing a hypnotist. I was trying to quit smoking. And I went to see this hypnotist a total of 3 times. The first time I went to see him, we worked on the smoking, and we did the backwards down the stairs, and I hypnotize very easily. I go very deep, don't know why, part of my psyche. Anyway, that happened. Then the second time I went back, and that worked. The first time I lit up right afterwards. The second time I had no urge to smoke because I'd gone even deeper. The third time I went back, I went incredibly deep into the hypnotic state. And during this experience, this person was also a medical doctor as well as a hypnotist. He was a Hopi Indian. Very interesting guy. Anyway, while we were in the middle of our session, he all of a sudden said to me, you might take this as you wish, but this has only happened to me one other time in my entire career of 13 years. I think somebody would like to communicate with you from the other side. And in my relaxed state of hypnosis, I somehow was not surprised by that. And I said, oh, and he said, do you know who it is? And I said, yes, I do, because this person and I had been like brother and sister for 25 years. And he said, do you wish to speak to him? And I said, yes, I do, because I was grieving pretty horribly. So he's told me to imagine that I was comfortable in and to invite him in. I'm going to leave his name out. Actually, I'll change it to John. And this person said, when you're ready, invite John into the room. So I envisioned a comfortable room. My eyes were wide open, even though I was deeply under, and I said, "John, please come in." And John appeared to me in a way, in a vision that after the fact I looked up online, and it was very typical of people appearing from the other side. He appeared, and I said, "Hey, what's up? And what are you doing here?" And he said, "I came here to tell you a message." And he said, "One, you need to stop grieving, because it is preventing my soul from doing the work that it needs to do, because I care for you so much that I cannot leave this realm until I know that you're okay. And two, the other reason I came is to bear you a message that the reason why I died was so that you could live on and do something special." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "That's for you to find out." And then he was gone. Now, that might sound, it's like something I could have imagined, so I thought. I popped out of the hypnotic state and I said to the hypnotist doctor, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I fell asleep during the session. I must have been so relaxed." And he said to me, let me preface this by saying we were in an empty dentist's office, and you know how they have all the folders up behind you and all the reference books and people's folders, and there was a whole wall behind me. And he said to me, "Before you dismiss that as a dream, I think you ought to turn around." And I was a little creeped out, but I turned around and looked behind me. All of the folders and reference books had not fallen, but had floated to the ground behind me. And I looked at him and I said, "I just need one question answered. When did this happen?" And he said, "It happened when you said, 'John, please come in.'"
Yes, I'd like to talk about my most unexpected experience I've ever had, and this happened back to me in 1982. At the time I was with my dad coming back from San Juan metropolitan area towards the other side of the island in Puerto Rico, to be specific, Guayama. And at that time, as we were going up this road that crosses one side of the island to the other, it's called Guabate. As we approach a curve, and the car lights were shining towards some bushes, we saw this creature coming out of the bushes. And I don't know if you know how a possum looks like, but that's how it looked at the time when I first saw it. That's what it resembled, sort of. But as we got closer, we could see that it had sort of like long hands, and it was more like one of these creatures that some artists paint or picture as aliens or extraterrestrials. And like I say, the thing just looked at us, we looked at it, and my dad and I didn't say anything to each other until we went further down, like probably another 15 minutes drive. And then he asked me, "Fredito," that means little Freddy, "did you see what I saw?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." "Do you know what that was?" And I said, "No, I'd never seen something like that before." Well, the whole thing is that this was back in 1982. Like 7 or 8 years after that, the known chupacabra started coming out into news as being a something that people hadn't had a chance to really see up close. And I believe for the drawings that I saw in the newspapers and the different people that had seen it, like described it, that's what I saw at that time. And like I say, I think that there is a chupacabra.
The most exciting thing in my life was when me and my dad got into an accident. It was not my dad's fault, of course. We were turning into a parking lot. A car just came 50 miles per hour and hit right into us. We were fine, except the car wasn't. It was totaled, but it was very exciting and kind of weird. The coolest thing that ever happened to me was once I was walking into Barnes & Noble's in New York, and people asked me to be on a French TV show. I don't really remember what it was about because I was 5 and now I'm 9, and it's very cool.
My most unforgettable experience was giving birth to my son.
My most extraordinary thing was I was like about 25 years old, 15 of us, including myself, we went caving. This place up in Pittsfield, Mass. And I can remember when we first started off, we just walked into the place, and then further down we had to crawl for at least, I'll say about a good 2 or 3 miles down. Then we could stand up again, and we got down to the bottom of it. You could see all the crystals and all the stuff hanging from the cave itself, and everything like that. And it was really, really a beautiful place inside. It was just too bad you couldn't bring a camera in here to take pictures of it, because boy, it's just unbelievable. It was the first time I ever done it and everything like that, and we had a great time and everything, and that should be pretty well it.
The experience I had was the most extreme. It was my first time in Africa, and it was part of a study abroad program. We were going on a safari, and we rolled down into this little crater called Ngorongoro Crater in our little Jeep, and we saw an elephant, and we were like, wow! And the elephant charged us and almost tipped the Jeep over and scared the crap out of me. That was the most extreme.
When the Ferris wheel was going around and around, and I was like 14 years old, and my mom and dad were on the Ferris wheel, and dad kept rocking it back and forth, and she was screaming, Sam, 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 don't do it. And then finally her wig flew off when they were way up in the air. And why she had a wig on to this day, I don't know, but her wig flew off. She had on a black wig, and she's already an Italian woman, so I don't know what happened with that. But
So your mom was wearing a wig?
yeah, my mom was wearing a wig.
You didn't know your mom had worn a wig?
No, she always had her natural hair, but when she went out this particular evening, she wore a wig, and my dad happened to be on the Ferris wheel with her, and he was rocking it, and it flew off.
Was she mad?
I would say she was a little embarrassed, and I was embarrassed too, but it was funny to see this thing fly.
So when I was growing up, I was really close to my grandmother, and she would always, she's very touchy-feely, and she'd always rub her hand on my back to make me feel better in any situation. And she passed away a couple years before I was studying abroad in Italy, and I was really lonely. I couldn't speak the language. I didn't connect with anyone else on the trip, and I felt very desolate. And I was sitting in the piazza at night, and I was crying, and there was no one in the piazza, and I just wanted to go home, and I was thinking about flying home. And then all of a sudden I felt this warm hand on my back, and I freaked out, and I, whooshed around to see who was there, and no one was there. And I just let that feeling, I still felt it on my back, and I felt really calm for the rest of the trip, and I felt like everything was okay. So, yeah.